So I watched Zack Snyder's Justice League the other day, and I swear I was having acute flashes of insight about life, the universe, and everything in it. Okay, maybe that's an overstatement, but still, I felt like I learned some valuable things while watching it, not just about the movie, but about the movie industry, people, and about Zack himself. And I would now like to share with you these 7 things that I learned while watching Zack Snyder's Justice League. Number 1. Trust the creator's vision. I cannot express how different this movie feels now. Where before it seemed like a clumsily directed cash grab, now it comes across as a labor of love. It went from being a generic dime-a-dozen superhero movie to an ensemble film that oozes personality and heart. This movie is about family, about fathers and sons, mothers and daughters. Before, I honestly couldn't tell you what it was about. It's amazing how much things can change if you provide context. Flash went from being an annoying kid to being the Flash. I actually buy him as the Flash now. He's less of a goof and more of a relatable, good person. Cyborg went from being a lame robot dude to being God, essentially. More powerful in many ways than Superman. And the Amazons went from ineffectual cosplayers to badass fighting force to the point where they could believably take on Leonidas and his 300. These are just a few examples off the top of my head, and they're all made possible by context. 10 minutes into this movie, I already started to get sick of the slow motion. If the whole film's like this, then it's gonna be hard to stomach, I thought to myself dismissively. Yet the rest of the film didn't have as much slow motion. It had even more. Yet I didn't tire out. I didn't get fatigued. I wasn't sick of it. I was enthralled by it. I'm not kidding. And that's because, for the most part, the slow-mo had a purpose. It had a reason to be there. Like during Barry's introduction, when it serves to show not just how powerful he is, but how he sees the world, how slow we all are to him. There are shots in this movie that only make sense with slow motion. They're living comic book pages that are meant to be enjoyed not just narratively but visually. This is Zack's vision, and the only reason I managed to enjoy it is because I managed to see it, to experience it in its entirety. It doesn't work otherwise. I have never fully enjoyed Thor Ragnarok. It's a competent, fun movie, but I personally always took issue with the premise, the very idea of the film, the idea of taking this end-of-the-world dramatic storyline and playing it for laughs. However, I also acknowledge that reining in Taika Waititi, the director, would have made it far worse for me. Taika had a vision, and it was important for me to see that vision and not some neutered version of it. And I can enjoy the film just fine. I would still like to see a different take on Thor Ragnarok someday, but I enjoy it nonetheless. I would not have enjoyed it had the studio chopped it up to pieces and made it conform and behave. So when you hire someone for a project, a creative person with a vision, trust in that vision. At that point, your path is set, and you can either accept it or ruin it. Thing number 2 that I've learned is that many films that I've seen are lies. When you're dealing with a director that has a lot of pull, that has their own production company, and is also fiercely uncompromising, you can be sure that what you see in the theater is more or less their vision. I'm starting to learn just how much of a rarity that really is, because usually there are far too many hands in the cookie jar, and it just spoils the entire project. It's enough to look at Tom Hardy and Jared Leto's morose countenance during interviews for Venom and Suicide Squad respectively. Both have complained that most of their work ended up on the cutting room floor, and now have to eat shit from fans who think they were in bad movies. But the movies we've seen are lies. They're shadows on the wall, cast by a vision that we will never get to experience. The Snyder Cut made me a more suspicious person. Henceforth, I shall forever walk into a movie theater wondering if what I'm about to see is a full-fledged film, or just a collection of scenes. But who knows? Maybe the Snyder Cut will mark the beginning of a revolution. Hashtag release the Ayer, Hardy, and Schumacher cuts. Lesson number 3. WB is the absolute worst. I don't know where Zack ends and Warner Bros. Begins in these movies, and I'll never know. What I do know is that chasing Marvel was wrong. Trying to replicate the realism of The Dark Knight was vain. Hiring a dark visionary, then tonally butchering his work to conform to the style guide of your competitor was dumb, and then showing us the unbutchered version that teases what could have been, but probably now never will be, is in many ways woefully cruel. Some have suggested that WB needed a Kevin Feige to help steer the ship. They have him. It's Zack. But they jerked him around. They trusted him, then they didn't trust him. Then they trusted him again. Then they damage controlled him. Talk about a fair weather studio. WB has an incredible roster of heroes that they've portrayed amazingly well in the past by letting creative people do their thing. But they took a bit of a gamble with Zack and then proceeded to flinch as soon as it seemed like it wasn't going to pay off. And in the world of business, that's kind of a bad thing to do, which is why WB are kinda horrible. But they're not alone, because frankly, we aren't much better. Why does Superman kill Zod? Why does Batman kill criminals? Why was Metropolis destroyed? Why doesn't Clark smile? Why is Lex Luthor not my Lex Luthor? Why isn't it funny? Why the gummy bears? Why is he Jesus? Why isn't it like Marvel? Bro, what's with this soundtrack? Who edited this? Why does he touch her hair? Why the high heels? Why is he Batman? Why isn't he Batman anymore? Why is this cut so short? Why is this so freaking long? Why? These are all bits of criticism that have, at one time or another, been forwarded by the people. Whether they're legitimate questions to ask is up to you and besides the point. There is such a thing as too much feedback.
And this is my feedback, and what I'm looking at is a wet bag of baby shit.
Worse still, the quality of feedback varies wildly from person to person and from comment to comment, and it seems to me that Warner Bros. Could use a better filter to separate the chaff from the wheat, to separate valid, constructive, useful criticism from just criticism. You might not have noticed this pattern, but whenever someone writes something like, "I hate the song in this scene, it's so stupid," the next 11 comments will write the exact same thing. But if they write something like, "The forced perspective in this scene is mind-blowing," well then, as you'd expect, you'll get a bunch of comments about forced perspective, even if they don't know what that means. This happens across all platforms. It's not a social media thing, it's a human thing. And that's the kind of feedback that should be weeded out as not relevant instead of being lifted up on a silver platter. Problem is, sometimes these things can snowball, and they snowball until you get this massive multi-headed feedback hydra. A bunch of mindless drones casually saying something they don't even mean, unknowingly contributing to the souring of an entire industry. And don't get me wrong, I have my fair share of things that I don't like about these movies, but I would rather have full, uncut creative vision rather than have the creators bending backwards for the sake of my validation. I think it helps for every individual to think of themselves as a creative visionary, and clearly people have no problems doing that. But as a creative person with your own vision, it's just as important to realize that Zack Snyder's Justice League will never be your Justice League, that Nolan's Tenet will never be your Tenet, and the Russo's Endgame will never be your Endgame. And trying too hard to impose your opinion, aka your creative vision, is wrong. It's a square peg in a round hole. They're two distinct things that have nothing to do with one another. Learn to make the distinction and you will be able to enjoy a wildly different take on Bruce Wayne. You'll be able to savor a dystopian Gotham. You'll be able to say, "This is not my Justice League, but I like it. I appreciate it." We've created this vicious cycle where you create something, people complain about it, you change it for their sakes, then they complain that you change it, so you change it back, and then they complain that you're tonally inconsistent. You can't win. There is only one out. Stay true to the creative vision. The next thing I've realized is that this is the culmination of a career. I have seen Zack make some compelling choices, then stumble and miss the mark a little. I have seen him struggle to meet impossible studio expectations and fan expectations while also trying to make a movie that he would enjoy. I have seen him experiment. I've seen him overindulge. I've seen him push boundaries, never once seen him budge. And all of that came together in this one film. This one late to the party, damn near abandoned film. This is something most people will never experience because most people never persevere in any one thing long enough to have it pay off, to reach enlightenment. But I know what that's like, and I've seen it play out during this movie. It truly felt like the culmination of a long, arduous process and a massive body of work. I saw the best of 300, the best of Man of Steel, even the best of BVS, yes, that one warehouse scene. All of it came together, all of that experience translated into a movie that I want to go back and rewatch, even now as I'm writing this. How many films can I honestly say that about? Nowadays, not many. While mistakes were of course made along the way, they paid off. Because hard work and experience always pay off. But we were impatient. The studio was impatient. Hell, even Zack must have grown impatient with himself. And it's a damn shame because now the DCEU is ready. And we're also ready to move on. Contracts end, others get signed, people get burned, others left behind. There are probably too many moving parts to get this big machine rolling again. Too many actors scorned, too many that don't want to do it anymore. Pity. The biggest crime of the Snyder Cut and Suicide Squad is that they both tease movies, intriguing movies, that we will never see. Thing number 6. This movie will age well. You probably think the opposite. I'll go out on a limb and state that when the dust of shallow entertainment, of cheap jokes, safe plots, and bland visuals settles, people will come back to this. It's already happening now. How many of the 20-something interchangeable Marvel movies can you honestly say that you would binge watch again? There are a few good ones that we put on pedestals and avoid bringing up the rest. Most of these will be forgotten in time, and what you're left with is the visionaries. The oddballs, the risk-takers. They're the ones that we'll remember for better or worse. I can't shake the feeling that this movie, Zack Snyder's Justice League, will be considered high art in 70 years by people who will experience it the way we experience vinyl music today. They'll experience it in some VR on steroids with 9 extra senses coming out of their bodies, feeling the time dilation and all the special effects on their skins, and musing how Zack Snyder was a misunderstood genius. And that brings me to the final thing I've learned, which is that Zack should have directed every movie in the DCEU. Wait, even Shazam? Yes, even Shazam. He's not stupid. He'd know how to switch gears if the situation called for it. This movie is proof of that. You know how Marvel hires a new director for every project and lets them go wild, but also not really because they're reined in and forced to make more or less the same movie over and over again? Well, that doesn't work for DC. They try to make it work, but it doesn't. It doesn't need a bunch of different directors spitballing ideas. No, they need one director, one helmsman, one visionary. Okay, but isn't that too much power for one person to have? Do we really want him doing everything? Of course not. I don't discount the value of collaborations. I mean, I love the prequels, but even I have to admit that George Lucas was at his best when collaborating with other directors. But honestly, after seeing the Amazons in Justice League, I really would have liked to have seen a Snyder-directed version of Wonder Woman. Something tells me Ares would have been a bit cooler in that version. Just saying. My hope is that people will slowly start to realize just how different Marvel and DC are as a whole, both us and them. I think they each require a special touch to shine. I don't know what the future holds for Zack or the DCEU, but I'm thankful, and I certainly didn't expect I'd be saying this. I'm thankful that I got the chance to experience Zack Snyder's Justice League.